They say winning the lottery changes your life, but for me, it didn't just change mine. It showed me exactly who the people I called family really were. My $1 million winning ticket wasn't a blessing, it was a mirror. And what it reflected was a betrayal so cold, so calculated, that I had to craft a plan of my own. They thought they had me figured out, but they were about to discover that a small town girl with nothing left to lose is a force they never saw coming. This is the story of how a lottery win became my revenge. I'm Eleanor Vance, and I'm 28 years old. I was a waitress at a small-town diner called the Rusty Spoon in rural Michigan. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills, barely. Last month, though, my life took a turn I never expected. I'd just finished a grueling double shift, my feet aching from 12 hours of running food and refilling coffee cups, when I stopped at the Quick Mart on my way home. On a whim, I grabbed a scratch-off ticket, the $20 Lucky Fortune card, a little treat to myself after a long week. My apartment was a tiny, one-bedroom place above a laundromat, with a persistent smell of dryer sheets and stale detergent. I sat at my wobbly kitchen table, my dinner, a microwaved burrito, growing cold, and began scratching. First, a cherry, then a lucky 7. A few more numbers appeared and my heart started to pound. I kept scratching, revealing one matching number after another. When I uncovered the final box, my mind went blank. Below the matching numbers, the prize read $1,000. $1 million. My hands were shaking so hard I dropped the card. I stared at the ticket, then at the numbers again, a wave of disbelief crashing over me. It couldn't be real. $1 million, a sum so vast it felt fictional. A lifetime of worry, of counting every penny, of stretching a paycheck to its absolute limit, all of it could just disappear. But as the initial shock faded, a cold, hard thought took its place. I wouldn't tell anyone, no one, not my family, not my friends, not a soul, not yet, because I knew with a certainty that chilled me to the bone that this money would change everything, and not for the better. My family, they weren't what you'd call a supportive bunch, especially when money was involved. I had a history with them, a long and painful one, and I knew exactly how they would react to this kind of news. If you're watching this, have you ever felt like you had to keep something huge a secret from your own family? Drop a comment below and let me know. Before I dive into the whole twisted story, hit that like button and subscribe. You're about to hear a story about betrayal, family greed, and a revenge plan that's so satisfying it might just change the way you see loyalty forever. Before that fateful night, my life was a relentless cycle of hard work and quiet struggle. The diner was my entire world. My boss, Mr. Henderson, was a decent man, but business was slow, and our hours were always getting cut. I barely made enough to cover rent and my ancient Ford Focus's gas tank. My biggest dreams were simple. Maybe one day I could afford to get my teeth fixed or take a real vacation, somewhere with an ocean. My social life was non-existent. I worked 6 days a week, and on my one day off, all I wanted to do was sleep. But my family, that's where the real trouble was. My older brother Mark was 32 and a self-proclaimed entrepreneur. He had a new get-rich-quick scheme every 6 months, each one more ridiculous than the last. He'd call me, usually late at night, with a sob story about needing seed money for his next big idea, a mobile dog grooming service, a gourmet hot dog stand, a crypto mining operation. I'd always scrape together whatever I could, a few $100s here and there because he was my brother, and I felt like I had to. Of course, I never saw a single cent of it again. My older sister, Sarah, was 30. She was a stay-at-home mom married to a man who, in her words, was doing very well for himself. Sarah lived in a perfect 2-story house with a white picket fence, a brand-new SUV in the driveway, and a perfectly manicured lawn. She'd always call me asking for favors. Could I watch her kids for a weekend? Could I help her clean the house for a party? Could I lend her the $500 she needed for a new designer handbag? She never saw it as me helping her out. She saw it as me having the time, and she, the golden child, was doing me a favor by letting me into her world. The payment was always the same, a hollow, "I'll get you back for this, I promise," followed by her never mentioning it again. My parents, Bob and Carol, were a whole other story. They'd always favored Mark and Sarah, seeing them as the success stories. Mark, the charming visionary, and Sarah, the one who married well. I was just Eleanor, the quiet one who worked in a diner. My parents were perpetually broke, not because they were lazy, but because they constantly bailed out Mark's failed business ventures and funded Sarah's extravagant lifestyle. They'd call me, their tone dripping with passive aggression, asking if I could help out with a little something. They'd never ask directly, "Oh no." They'd just talk about how much they were struggling, about how Mark's latest idea was really taking off, or how Sarah's kids were so expensive, and then they'd sigh deeply. The hint was always clear. We can't ask them for help because they're on a path to greatness. But you, Eleanor, you're not doing anything with your life anyway, so why not give us some cash? My grandparents were the only ones who ever seemed to truly care about me. My grandma, Rose, lived in a small, tidy house full of books and family photos, and my grandpa, Richard, was a retired carpenter who could fix anything. They didn't have much, but they always offered me a warm meal and a listening ear, never asking for anything in return. My only true friend, besides my grandparents, was Jessica, a fellow waitress at the diner. She was a single mom of two who understood the grind and the struggle in a way my family never could. She'd listen to my rants about my family's constant demands, offering a sympathetic nod and a glass of cheap wine. She was the only person who saw me, really saw me, and never judged me for my choices. Back at the diner, things weren't much better. My co-worker, Ben, a fresh-faced college student, was always forgetting his side work, leaving me to clean up his messes. Mr. Henderson, our boss, didn't notice because Ben was his nephew, and a certain level of slack was always cut for him. So I would end up staying late, scrubbing down the griddle and mopping the floor, all while Ben was home studying for his next exam. I kept my head down, did my job, and just hoped that someday, somehow, all this hard work would pay off in some small way. My dream was a simple one, really. I wanted to move out of the apartment above the laundromat. I wanted to maybe go to community college and get a degree in something, anything, besides hospitality. I wanted a life where I didn't have to calculate every grocery purchase and worry about whether my car would start in the morning. My life was a monotonous cycle of bills, work, and family demands. The day I bought the winning ticket was a particularly awful day at work. The afternoon rush had been insane. The cook had quit mid-shift, and I'd spent the entire time trying to placate angry customers. As I drove home, I felt a heavy sense of defeat. That's when I saw the Quick Mart, its neon lights blinking in the dusk. I went inside, grabbed my usual six-pack of Coors Light, and then, without thinking, I grabbed a Lucky Fortune scratch-off ticket. As I handed the clerk my money, he grinned. "Looks like someone needs a little luck tonight, huh?" he said. I just smiled weakly. "I sure hope so." Instead of just scratching the ticket right there, I waited until I was home, safe in my quiet, lonely apartment. It wasn't until after I ate my microwaved burrito that I remembered the ticket. With a sigh, I picked it up, expecting nothing as usual. The scratching sound filled the quiet room. I uncovered the first number, matched the second. Another match. My heart started to beat a little faster. By the fifth number, I was holding my breath. When I uncovered the final number and saw it matched, I just stared, frozen in place. Then I saw the prize amount, $1,000. It couldn't be right. I must have misread it. I checked the ticket, then the back, then the front again. My eyes scanned the numbers one more time. $1 million. I dropped the ticket on the table, my mind reeling. I had just won a life-changing amount of money, a sum so large it was impossible to comprehend. I spent the rest of the night wide, awake, a cold dread settling in my stomach. I went online, reading article after article about lottery winners. The stories were all the same. Lives torn apart by greed, families ripped apart by demands, distant relatives coming out of the woodwork, begging for money. Winners were broke within 5 years, more miserable than they were before their big win. The lottery, one article said, was the quickest path to losing everything you care about. As the sun began to rise, I knew what I had to do. I would claim the money, but I would tell no one. I would keep it a secret, a shield between me and the people who would use and abuse me if they knew. At least, not yet. I needed a plan. I needed to see if they were even worth sharing this new life with. I needed to see who, if anyone, was truly on my side. The next morning, I called in sick to the diner, an empty lie that I was too ill to work. I then made an appointment with a lawyer in the city, a man named Mr. Finch, who specialized in trusts and estate planning. His office was in a sleek downtown building, and as I sat in the waiting room in my worn-out jeans and a faded hoodie, I felt like an imposter. Mr. Finch was a kind, older man with a warm smile. "How can I help you today, Miss Vance?" he asked, his voice soft. I took a deep breath, and with shaking hands, I slid the winning scratch-off ticket across his polished mahogany desk. "I need to claim this," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "But I need to do it without anyone knowing it was me." Mr. Finch's eyes widened slightly as he looked at the ticket, then at me. He composed himself and gave me a reassuring nod. "You've come to the right place," he said. "That's exactly what we're going to do." For the next 2 hours, Mr. Finch walked me through the process of setting up a blind trust. He explained how the money would be claimed, how it would be invested, and how I could access it without anyone ever knowing it was me. He told me that the biggest mistake lottery winners make is telling people too soon. Once the secret is out, he said, it's impossible to put it back in the bottle. I left his office with a folder full of legal documents and a new sense of purpose. I had a plan, a way to keep this money safe from my family, a way to see if they would still care about me even if I didn't have $1 million. Over the next few weeks, I worked closely with Mr. Finch to finalize all the details. We set up a blind trust, and the $1 million was claimed and deposited into a secure investment portfolio. The money was real, sitting in an account that no one knew about. Yet my day-to-day life remained unchanged. I still went to work at the diner, still complained about my car with Jessica, and still drove my clunky old Focus. The secrecy, though, was starting to weigh on me. I found myself wondering about my family. Would they ever be happy for me? Would they ever be proud of me without a financial reward? The questions haunted me. It was then that an idea began to take shape, a plan to find out who my family truly was. I would create a scenario where I needed help, financial help, a significant amount, but not so much that it would be unbelievable. I would approach each family member with the same story, the same request, and I would see who would help me without the prospect of gaining anything in return. Only then would I know who deserved to be a part of my new life. The plan was solidifying in my mind. I'd meet with Mr. Finch one last time to ensure my finances were completely secure before I moved forward. Everything was in order, he assured me, placing a thick folder on his desk. Your financial future is set, Eleanor. You could quit your job today if you wanted to. I shook my head. Not yet. An abrupt change would raise too many questions. That night, I called Jessica and asked her to come over. As we sat on my tiny porch, sipping on cheap wine, I told her about my plan. I'm going to run a little experiment with my family, I began, choosing my words carefully. Jessica raised an eyebrow. An experiment? What kind of experiment? I took a deep breath. I'm going to tell them I lost my job at the diner and that I'm in a financial bind. I'm going to ask them for help, just to see who will step up when I really need them. Jessica's face, usually so open and kind, turned to one of concern. Eleanor, that seems manipulative. Why would you do that? Because I'm tired of being the one who always helps everyone else, I said, my voice thick with emotion. I need to know who would be there for me if the tables were turned. I need to know who truly cares about me. But lying to them, to test them, she said, shaking her head. That doesn't sound like you. Why not just talk to them? Have an honest conversation? I laughed, a bitter, humorless sound. You know my family, Jessica. Honest conversations aren't in their vocabulary. I'm not trying to prove anything, I insisted, though that wasn't entirely true. I just want to know who sees me as a person and who sees me as a resource. Jessica sighed. I think you're going to get hurt more than anyone else. But I know that look in your eye. You've already made up your mind." She was right. I had spent that day crafting my story. It had to be believable, but not so dramatic that it would raise suspicion. I decided to tell everyone that the Rusty Spoon was closing. I would say I needed $10,000 to cover rent and bills until I could find a new job. It was a significant amount, but not so outrageous that it was beyond their means, especially since they all had more money than me. I made a list of everyone I would approach: my parents, Bob and Carol, my brother, Mark, my sister, Sarah, and my grandparents, Rose and Richard. I even included a few extended family members who had always been quick to ask for a favor. I made a prediction list of how I thought each person would respond. My parents would probably offer some help, but it would come with a lecture about my poor life choices. My sister Sarah would definitely say she was too busy with her kids and her house. My brother Mark would probably say he was invested in his next big thing and couldn't help. My grandparents, they were the only ones I had a real hope for. But even then, $10,000 was a lot of money for a retired couple living on a fixed income. The plan was set. Over the next week, I would reach out to each family member, tell them the same story, and wait for them to respond. It was the only way I could know who truly cared about me. With a mix of anticipation and dread, I picked up my phone and made the first call. It was time to find out who my real family was. I started with my mom, Carol. I knew she'd be the easiest to get to, and I thought that she'd be the most likely to help. Her voice was warm as she answered. "Hi, sweetie. Everything okay? You sound a little down." I took a deep breath and launched into my story, my voice thick with fake sadness. "The Rusty Spoon is closing, Mom. Mr. Henderson lost the lease. We all got a week's notice. I'm scrambling, and I don't know what to do." My mom gasped. "Oh, honey, that's awful. What about your job hunt? Are you going to be okay?" I explained that the job market for waitresses in our small town was tight and that I was worried I wouldn't find something in time to make rent. "I hate to ask, Mom, but I need some help. About $10,000 to cover rent and bills until I can find something new. I promise I'll pay you back as soon as I can." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "Oh, Eleanor," she said, her voice now full of a familiar, strained politeness. "Your father and I just helped Mark with his new business venture. We're stretched pretty thin right now. Have you asked Sarah? Her husband, Paul, makes good money." I explained that I was hoping to avoid asking Sarah, and that I was hoping my parents, who had always told me they loved me unconditionally, would be the first to help. My mom sighed. "Well, let me talk to your father and see what we can do. But I can't promise anything. You know how tight he is with money, especially with Mark's new venture taking up all our funds." I hung up the phone, a hollow feeling in my stomach. She hadn't said no, but the way she had passed the responsibility to my father told me everything I needed to know. She'd tried to pass the buck, not because she couldn't help, but because she didn't want to. The next day, I met my dad, Bob, for coffee. I chose a small, crowded cafe, thinking he would be less likely to give me a lecture in public. "You look tired," was his greeting. I gave him a weak smile and told him the story about the Rusty Spoon closing. His face remained impassive as I spoke, his eyes fixed on his coffee cup. When I finished and asked for the $10,000, he leaned back in his chair and crossed his arms. "Eleanor," he began, his voice taking on a familiar lecturing tone. "I've always taught you about financial responsibility. This is why you should have been saving your money. Why did you not have an emergency fund?" For the next 20 minutes, he lectured me on the importance of living below my means, of saving every paycheck, and of having a career plan. He never once offered to help. "I would love to help you, sweetie, but your mother and I have all our money tied up in Mark's new business. We can't afford to just give away money. It would be fiscally irresponsible. This will be a good learning experience for you. Sometimes we need to hit rock bottom before we make a change for the better." I nodded, fighting back tears that were only partly fake. It still hurt to hear him dismiss my needs so easily. My sister Sarah was next. I drove to her beautiful suburban home on a Saturday afternoon. Her husband, Paul, was at the gym, so we had the house to ourselves. "Eleanor, what a surprise!" she exclaimed when she opened the door. Her house was immaculate, a perfect showcase of her perfect life. As we sat in her perfectly decorated living room, sipping on expensive lattes, I told her my story. "Oh my God, that's awful," she gasped, her hand flying to her chest. "I can't believe they would just do that." Her sympathy seemed genuine, and for a moment I felt a flicker of hope. Then I mentioned needing to borrow the $10,000. Her expression shifted immediately. "Oh," she said, her voice now a little strained. "Well, this is actually not a great time. We just bought a new boat, and the kids' private school tuition was due. Plus, we're redoing the pool." She glanced around nervously. "Paul handles most of our finances, and he's really strict about our budget. I'm so sorry, but I can't ask him for that kind of money right now. It would be a nightmare." I thanked her for her sympathy, but I knew what her words meant. It wasn't that she couldn't help. It was that she didn't want to. My brother Mark was perhaps the most disappointing. After I texted him the detailed story, he responded with a brief message. "Damn, that sucks, sis. I'm pretty tight right now myself. I'll call you later." He never did. My follow-up messages went unanswered, and my calls went straight to voicemail. This from the same brother who had borrowed thousands from me over the years, always with promises to pay me back that never materialized. My extended family's reactions were no different. My Aunt Sharon told me she couldn't help because she was invested in her new home renovation. My cousin Steve, who had just gotten a promotion at work, said he was saving for the future and couldn't spare a dime. By the end of the week, after countless phone calls, texts, and awkward conversations, I was emotionally exhausted. The experiment had confirmed my worst fears, but the reality was still painful to accept. 7 people who had repeatedly asked for and received my help over the years could not or would not return the favor when I needed them. Then my phone rang. It was my grandma, Rose. "Eleanor, honey, I just heard from your mother about your job. Are you okay?" Her voice was warm with genuine concern. I had not even reached out to my grandparents yet. The fact that she had called me first, after hearing about my situation secondhand, spoke volumes. "I'm hanging in there, Grandma," I said, the emotion in my voice now entirely real. "I need to see you. Can you and Grandpa come over for dinner tomorrow night? My treat." The next evening, my grandparents came over, their faces etched with concern. My grandma Rose hugged me tightly. "I'm so sorry about your job, sweetheart. That place never appreciated you anyway." As we ate, they asked me thoughtful questions about my job search and offered to help me look for new opportunities. Then, after our plates had been cleared, my grandpa, Richard, reached into his wallet and pulled out a check. "It's not much," he said, sliding it across the table, "but it's all we have in our savings. It's for $3,000. It's not the full amount you need, but it should help with the rent at least." I stared at the check in shock. "Grandpa, I can't take this," I whispered, tears welling up in my eyes. "Nonsense. Family helps family," he insisted. "And I want you to know something else." He reached across the table and took my hand. "If you need a place to stay to save on rent, we have a spare room. It's not fancy, but you're welcome to stay as long as you need to." Tears streamed down my face, and this time they were completely genuine. "Thank you," I whispered, overwhelmed by their generosity. "Now don't you worry about paying this back right away," my grandma said, her eyes twinkling. "Get back on your feet first. Find a job you actually like this time. Life is too short to work somewhere that doesn't appreciate you." Driving home, I clutched the check in my hand, a small piece of paper that was worth more than $1 million. The contrast between my grandparents' response and the rest of my family's could not have been more stark. The only people who had offered genuine help were the ones with the least to give. After meeting with my grandparents, I decided to do some research. I looked up the average savings of a retired couple on a fixed income, and my heart broke. $3,000 was nearly all of their savings. I also discovered that my grandpa had recently had some health complications, and their medical bills were starting to pile up. The knowledge hit me like a physical blow. My grandparents, who had so little, had given me almost everything they had, without hesitation or conditions. Meanwhile, my brother was taking money from my parents for his latest scheme, and my sister was complaining about the cost of her new pool. The next day, I invited my grandparents to my apartment for a special dinner. As they sat on my worn couch, I noticed for the first time how much older they looked, the lines on their faces deeper than I remembered. "Grandma, Grandpa, I have something I need to tell you," I began, my voice trembling. "I haven't been completely honest with you." Their expressions remained open, curious rather than concerned. "What is it, sweetheart?" my grandpa asked. "I didn't lose my job. The rusty spoon is fine. I made up the story to see who in the family would help me if I needed it." My grandparents were quiet for a moment. Then my grandma nodded slowly. "I see. Are you angry? With me?" I asked, afraid of losing the one genuine relationship I had discovered through this experiment. She considered the question. "No, not angry. Sad, maybe. Sad that you felt you needed to test people this way." She took a sip of her tea. "But I understand why you did it. Our family, they haven't always been kind to you." "You were the only ones who offered to help," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "Everyone else had excuses or just ignored me entirely." My grandpa sighed. "People show you who they are when giving becomes inconvenient. I learned that lesson the hard way myself." "What do you mean?" My grandpa set down his cup and folded his hands in his lap. "My own brother, your great-uncle John. We were always close. But when my business started to take off, he saw me as nothing more than a bank. He'd come over with a sob story about needing money for a new car or to put his kids through college, and I would always give it to him. But then, when my business failed and I needed a loan to keep our house, he told me he couldn't help. He said he was saving for a rainy day. I was shocked. I had no idea. He never spoke to me again. He preferred the version of me where I was the one who could give, not the one who needed. The point is, I learned that some people see you as a resource rather than a person, and it's a painful lesson." My grandma reached for my hand. "Money doesn't just reveal who others truly are, Eleanor. It reveals who we are too. How we use it, how we share it, how we talk about it. It's a powerful mirror." Her words resonated deeply. In that moment, I made a decision. "Grandma, Grandpa, there's something else I need to tell you. Something big." I took a deep breath. "I won the lottery 3 weeks ago, $1 million. I haven't told anyone else. Not my parents, not Mark or Sarah. You're the first to know." Their eyes widened, but they remained silent, waiting for me to continue. "Oh, Eleanor," my grandma breathed. That is life-changing." "I know. And that's why I did this test. I needed to know who would be there for me without knowing about the money." My grandpa nodded slowly. "I understand that. But what will you do now?" "That's what I'm trying to figure out. The money is secure, and I have a good lawyer, but I don't know how to handle the family. I don't know what to do about them." My grandma considered this. "You know you don't owe anyone anything, Eleanor, not even us. But I want to help you," I insisted. "Your medical expenses, a better house, whatever you need." She smiled gently. "I don't need anything from you, sweetheart. I'm happy with my life. Our house is small, but it's full of things we love. Our car runs most of the time. We have our students. And now, this wonderful secret with our favorite granddaughter." She patted my hand. "Just knowing you are secure and happy would be enough for me." Her selflessness brought tears to my eyes. Here was someone who had given me almost everything she had when she thought I needed it, and now was asking for nothing in return when she knew I had millions. As we continued talking into the night, the contrast between my grandparents and the rest of my family became even more stark. While I had been conducting my experiment, word had spread through the family about my supposed financial troubles. Instead of prompting concern, it had mainly generated gossip and judgment. My phone buzzed with a text from my mom. "Heard you. Asked Sarah for money too. You should have told me you were asking everyone. It feels like you're playing us against each other." Another came from my dad. "Your mother tells me you've been calling everyone for handouts. This is exactly the kind of irresponsible behavior I warned you about." The family had turned my request for help into evidence of my character flaws, rather than an opportunity to show compassion, and in doing so, they had revealed everything I needed to know about the true nature of our relationships. The morning after my conversation with my grandparents, I met with Mr. Finch to discuss my long-term financial plans. Now that I had clarity about my family relationships, I could make decisions about my future with open eyes. I want to set up a trust for my grandparents, I told him. Something that will cover their medical expenses and provide them with a comfortable retirement, but in a way that feels like a gift rather than charity. They're very proud people. Mr. Finch nodded, making notes. We can structure it as a family trust that provides a monthly stipend. They wouldn't have to manage a large sum all at once, which can be overwhelming for someone not used to wealth. Perfect. And I want to buy them a small, accessible house near wherever I decide to live. Nothing extravagant, just comfortable and easy to get around for someone with health issues. We spent the next hour discussing investment strategies, charitable foundations, and my own living situation. I had decided to give notice at the diner and focus on establishing a nonprofit organization aimed at helping elderly people living alone, inspired by my grandparents' situation and the many others like them. "What about the rest of your family?" Mr. Finch asked cautiously. "Do you plan to tell them about the winnings?" I shook my head. "Not right now. Maybe not ever. But I do want to arrange a family meeting to clear the air about my financial troubles. They need to know the truth." Later that day, I called Jessica and finally told her everything, the lottery win and the family experiment. After her initial shock, she understood why I had kept it a secret. "So what now?" she asked. "Are you going to become one of those eccentric millionaires who still clips coupons and drives a beat-up car?" I laughed. "No, but I'm not going to suddenly start buying Bentleys either. I want this money to mean something, to do good, starting with my grandparents. They deserve it." Jessica agreed. "And what about everyone else? The ones who failed your test?" "I'm still figuring that out. I've called a family meeting for this weekend. I told them I have an important announcement." When Sunday arrived, I was surprised to see everyone show up at my apartment. My mom and dad, Mark, Sarah, and a few of my extended family members. My grandparents came last, giving me a secret smile as they entered. As everyone settled into my small living room, looking around with varying degrees of curiosity and judgment, I stood before them feeling strangely calm. "Thank you all for coming," I began. "I know there have been rumors going around about my financial situation, and I wanted to address them directly." My mom shifted uncomfortably. Mark suddenly became very interested in his phone. Sarah and Paul exchanged glances. "The truth is, I'm fine. I found a new job with better pay and benefits." This was technically true, as I had just appointed myself executive director of my new foundation with a modest salary. "I'll be transitioning to that position next month." "Well, that's wonderful news," my mom said with obvious relief. "We've all been so worried." I noticed several faces relax around the room. They had come expecting either to be asked for money again or perhaps to stage some sort of intervention about my financial habits. Instead, they were getting good news that required nothing from them. "So why all the drama about needing money?" my dad asked, his tone accusatory. "Why ask everyone for help if you had a job lined up?" I met his gaze steadily. "The job came through recently, and when I was in trouble, I reached out to my family. That's what family is supposed to be for, right?" An uncomfortable silence fell over the room. "Well, we all have our own financial commitments," Sarah said defensively. "It's not always possible to help even when we want to." "Of course," I agreed. "We all have to make choices about our priorities." I turned to Mark. "Speaking of which, Mark, I noticed you never responded to my messages when I needed help. Yet you had no problem asking me for $3,000 last Christmas for your rent." He had the grace to look embarrassed. "I was going through some stuff, and I didn't have any money to give you." "You didn't even call me back," I pointed out. "That would have been free." The meeting continued in this vein, with me calmly but firmly addressing the hypocrisy and absence of support I had experienced. No one admitted any wrongdoing. There were excuses, justifications, and even some attempts to turn the blame back on me for making everyone feel guilty. As they filed out after an uncomfortable hour, I felt a strange sense of closure. I had not told them about the lottery win, but I had stood up for myself in a way I never had before. The money had given me something perhaps more valuable than wealth itself, the courage to see my relationships clearly and to set boundaries accordingly. My grandparents stayed behind after everyone left, helping me clean up the coffee cups and plates. "You did well," my grandma said quietly. "That couldn't have been easy." "It was actually easier than I expected," I replied. For the first time, I wasn't afraid of disappointing them because I realized their opinion of me was never based on who I really am. My grandpa smiled. "That's a powerful realization. So, what happens next?" "Next," I said, looking at them with a newfound sense of purpose, "we start looking at houses. For all of us." 1 year later, my life was unrecognizable from the day I had first discovered those matching lottery numbers. I had moved into a beautiful but modest home in a quiet neighborhood with a garden that brought me joy each morning. Just 3 blocks away was my grandparents' new house, a single-story craftsman with wide doorways to accommodate my grandpa's walker on the days his health issues made walking difficult. My non-profit organization had grown beyond my expectations. We provided companionship, home repairs, and financial assistance to elderly people living alone, with a special focus on those estranged from their families. The work was rewarding in a way my waitressing career had never been, and we had already helped over 200 seniors in our city. Jessica had eventually joined the organization as our outreach coordinator, bringing her compassionate nature and organizational skills to our mission. She and I still had our weekly wine nights, though now they took place on my comfortable patio rather than in my cramped apartment. My relationship with my family had shifted into something more distant, but also more honest. I maintained occasional contact with most of them, polite birthday calls and holiday greetings, but the pretense of closeness had fallen away. Without the expectation of emotional intimacy that had never actually existed, our interactions became less painful. None of them knew about my lottery winnings. As far as they were concerned, I had simply found success with my new career in nonprofit management. They seemed to accept this explanation without much curiosity about the details, which told me everything I needed to know about their interest in my life. There had been moments of temptation to reveal the truth, particularly when Mark called asking for money for a new business venture, or when Sarah complained about the cost of her kitchen renovation. But each time I remembered the silence when I had needed help, and the choice became clear. Interestingly, there had been occasions when family members genuinely needed assistance. When my dad had a minor heart attack and faced unexpected medical bills, I anonymously paid them through the hospital's patient assistance fund. When my cousin Steve finally got laid off from his job and was facing foreclosure, I made an anonymous donation to a local nonprofit that helped him keep his home. They never knew the source of these gifts, and I preferred it that way. My grandparents and I had dinner together at least twice a week. Their health had improved dramatically. With proper medical care and less financial stress, they had retired from their volunteer work, but were now spending their days gardening and enjoying their new, more comfortable lives. "You know what still amazes me?" my grandma said one evening as we sat on her porch watching the sunset. "How differently everything could have turned out if you had announced your lottery win right away." I nodded. "The family would have suddenly become very attentive and loving, I imagine. And you would never have known what was real," my grandpa added. "That knowledge, painful as it was, gave you freedom." They were right. The experiment had been painful but illuminating. It had shown me who deserved a place in my life and who did not. It had revealed the true nature of relationships I had spent years trying to strengthen despite their fundamental imbalance. The greatest lesson I had learned was not about others, but about myself. Before the lottery, I had defined my worth by what I could give to others, constantly trying to earn love through sacrifice and generosity. I had allowed myself to be used because I believed that was what family meant, what love required. Now I understood that real love, the kind my grandparents had shown me, did not keep a balance sheet. It gave freely without expectation of return, but it also respected boundaries and dignity. It was honest and consistent, present in good times and bad. I had initially kept my winning secret out of fear, worried that money would corrupt my relationships. What I had not anticipated was how the secret would clarify them instead, stripping away pretense and revealing truth. The money had not changed who anyone was. It had simply illuminated who they had been all along. My life now was rich in ways that had nothing to do with my bank account. I had a purpose through my foundation, genuine connection with my grandparents and Jessica, and a hard-won understanding of my own worth that no external validation could shake. Perhaps most importantly, I had peace. The constant anxiety about finances that had been my lifelong companion was gone, but so too was the desperate need for approval from people incapable of giving it. I had built a life aligned with my values, rather than my insecurities. My grandma reached over and patted my hand, bringing me back to the present moment. "You did good, kiddo. Not just with the money, but with what you learned." I smiled at her, overwhelmed with gratitude for this woman who had shown me what family truly meant. I had a good teacher. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, I thought about the journey that had brought me here, from the shock of those matching numbers, to the pain of rejection, to the joy of creating something meaningful with my unexpected fortune. The money had changed my life, yes, but not in the ways I had initially feared or hoped. It had simply given me the freedom to see clearly and choose wisely. The most valuable thing I had gained had nothing to do with millions in the bank. It was the understanding that the people who deserve a place in your life are not those who are there when you have everything to give, but those who stay when you have nothing to offer but yourself. Have you ever had to test someone's loyalty in your life? What did you learn from that experience? Share your stories in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit like and subscribe to hear more real-life lessons that might change your perspective. Remember to share this video with someone who might need to hear that their worth is not determined by what they can give to others. Thank you for listening, and may you find the clarity to recognize the true relationships in your own life.